Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Rareminds podcast. A really warm welcome if you're a new listener or if you've been listening to us for a while. It's a real honour to have as this month's guest, Liz Curtis. In 2006, Liz gave birth 5 weeks early to her daughter, Lily. Initially, all seemed well, but after a number of emerging health issues and crises, Liz and her partner Dave were given the devastating news that Lily had mitochondrial disease and was unlikely to live for very long. And Lily died in April 2007. Child bereavement is very sadly a part of the lives of many in the rare community, where statistically 30% of children die before her 5th birthday. And we felt it was really important to devote an episode to this area, which is really difficult to talk about, but so much a part, as we've said, of so many people's lives. Liz, we were talking earlier about how when we're going through extraordinary or really painful or difficult life experiences, it's a really natural impulse to want to seek out others who've been through something similar, really to try and help us make sense of how to do this, how to do the thing that we haven't done before, and how to survive and get through it and cope. And that's the point of this podcast. So, Liz, you'd given birth to this lovely baby girl, and initially all seemed well, but that changed really quite quickly, I think. Can you tell us a bit more about what happened for you?
Yeah, of course. I had Lily 5 weeks early because there was a problem with the placenta and Lily, so they decided that they needed to deliver her early. And as you say, she was beautiful. Everything was right. She had everything she needed. She was incredibly small, and she only weighed about 3 pounds 8 ounces and was classed as full term pretty much. And there were babies
Tiny.
She was tiny, yeah, she was tiny. But there were babies in the SCBU unit who were born a lot earlier than her. They were a lot bigger than her.
Right.
So it was really obvious that, that she was very, very small. And I had to get her to 4 pounds before we were allowed to take her home. And it took forever. Initially, she was fed through a tube the tube through her nose, an NG tube. And that suited Lily, and she did gain weight on that. But as soon as they took that out and we started to try to feed her via bottle or breast, she clearly just wasn't gaining weight. And I remember the doctors coming around to do their morning ward rounds going, "Come on, Lily, just grow. Why are you here?" Because they'd done all the tests. They'd done her heart scans. They'd done all the tests on her. And there didn't seem to be anything at the time that they could pick up.
So you're all willing her to just put weight on and kind of grow, and puzzled as to what's happening.
Just nobody could really work out why she wasn't. Anyway, we finally got her to the 4 pounds that she needed to be to get her home, and that took around about 4 weeks. And then when we got her home, she seemed to get longer but thinner. And the health visitors, everybody was really puzzled. The health visitor literally came around every day to weigh her because they couldn't work out what was going on. And then it was around about, I think we'd been home for about 3 weeks. And I decided that I was going to be really brave and take my 3 children shopping. And, we were in the car park and I went,
"You can do it," kind of thing.
I can do this. And my mum said, "I'm going to come with you. This has been a bit of a traumatic, few months. Let's not try and do everything all at once." So anyway, my mum came with me. And as I went to put Lily back in the car seat, I looked at her in the pushchair, and she was clearly not breathing. She was grey. She was foaming around the mouth. I just remember picking her up saying, "Oh my God, Mum, she's not breathing. She's not breathing." So we got the other 2 who were quite young in the car. I phoned 999, and we had this really sort of quite a traumatic conversation on the phone with 999 saying, "Oh, okay, but where's the car park? What's the postcode of the car park?" I'm like, "I've got no idea." And then what's the level, how high is the height barriers in the car park? I don't know.
You can't think in the moment either, can you? Everything goes out your head.
Totally couldn't think of anything. And I remember my mum just sort of giving her some sort of small heart massages. And fortunately, somebody walked passed, and they went and got the security, and we worked it out that a first response car came up in the lift. But that sort of was the start of things not being particularly great for Lily, and we ended up in hospital. But the hospital that she went to discharged her quite early, about after a couple of hours. And a friend of mine was a paediatric nurse, and she said to me, "Liz, I feel really uncomfortable about this. You know, with her start, she's not gaining weight. You know, she's obviously stopped breathing for a significant amount of time."
And such a traumatic and unusual thing to go through, but I imagine with no clear kind of picture as to what happened there at that point either.
There was no real, you know, she started to breathe by herself, so there was no real sort of understanding, as you say. So I took her back to where she was born, where at least I knew they had all of her notes and everything else, and that was the sort of the beginning of a 10-day stay, during which she just deteriorated to the point whereby I had come home one evening to put my other two children to bed. And when I got back, she wasn't in the room that I'd left her in with the nurse, and I couldn't work out where she was. And anyway, they'd moved her near the station. She was grey. She had gone really downhill. She was so poorly that they shut the A&E, the children's A&E that day, and they didn't want to take in any more children because they felt that the staff all needed to be focused on Lily. She, in front of me, had a cardiac arrest, and they had to defibrillate her. The defibrillation machine was too big because she was still tiny. So it was
so traumatic,
really traumatic.
Tiny baby.
Yeah, and I remember
seeing someone being shocked for a cardiac arrest as an adult, but never mind as a baby.
Yeah, it was really traumatic, and I remember them taking all her clothes off so they could watch her chest. I'm thinking she's going to freeze. She's going to freeze. You know, she's got nothing to keep her warm. And they had called a retrieval team by this point, so the team from the Evelina were on their way, and they arrived, and it felt like my saviours had arrived. You know, they arrived with this, you know, like incubator, really trained staff that really knew what they were doing. They weren't phased. They were really calm. And, you know, I'm not saying that the staff in the hospital ward weren't. They were incredible and they did everything right. But when the retrieval team arrived, it just felt like it was gone up a notch. You know, it was an intensive care team. They knew how to intubate her. They, you know, it was all very, very calm. Got her to the Evelina and straight into intensive care. And we were only there for 5 days, but they did some really intense testing on her. And to be honest, our local hospital already started to look at mitochondrial condition.
So it's sort of a bit on the radar, but
it was
one of many things, maybe.
Say that again, sorry.
One of a few things that they were exploring at that point.
Well, they'd picked up on a high lactate, which is a real indicator of a mitochondrial disease. So I remember a junior doctor coming in to speak to me and said, "This is what we think she has, but we need to do a lot more testing." And she sort of said to me, "We don't know what the future holds for Lily. It will definitely lead to global developmental delay, but we don't know what else at this point." And that's when she told me to go home to put my other two girls to bed. She said, "Because I think the next few days would be quite a lot for you to deal with." But those few days, that night, that's when she deteriorated. So we ended up in the Evelina, and we were there for 5 days. So she was intubated, she was on life support, and they used this opportunity to do some quite invasive testing on her, such as lumbar punctures. She had a muscle biopsy, so some muscle taken from her leg, and some eye tests and things like that they all did while she was, you know, being supported with her breathing. And, you know, it really quickly came back that they were really quite sure that she had a mitochondrial disease, although we wouldn't get the full testing back for another 2 to 3 months. And yeah, I'd never heard of mitochondrial disease. I remember a consultant coming around on the ward, on the intensive care ward, saying that they believed that Lily had a mitochondrial disease. There was no cure, there's no treatment, and they were really sorry, but Lily was going to die. And your first question is, when? You know, how long have we got? What's it going to look like? And then Dave said, we've got 2 other children. You know, how do we tell them? What will it mean for them? Are they going to be affected? You know, all these things that just immediately come into your mind.
Domino effect of things that just explode in your mind.
Totally, yeah. Just sort of panic. Yeah, that's sort of, and then they started talking about what we wanted to do. She'd been there for 5 days. For me, as her mum, it was one of the most traumatic things was seeing her in this bed. You know, she was this tiny little thing in this big sort of intensive care bed. She had 2 to 1, you know, she had 2 nurses looking after her 24/7. She had this great big green tube down her throat that I could see was really uncomfortable. She used to make these little grimacy faces, you know, and I think she must have been in a lot of pain, you know, not in a lot of pain, but uncomfortable from the tube. And, you know, and I used to look around in intensive care and I look at all these other children. And I remember the consultant saying to me one day, your baby's the sickest in here. And I'm thinking, she looks so perfect, you know. And then, you know, we have to make a decision. What do? We know she's going to die. They had tried to withdraw her by turning down the ventilation and she wasn't responding to that. So they believed that as soon as we removed the tube and turned off the machine, that she would pass away fairly quickly. So we, you know, you do what you do. All the family came up and said their goodbyes. A few close friends, and we removed the tube. We took the machines away, and we waited and she didn't stop breathing, and then she started to cry, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting this. And I said, what do I do? Do I feed her? Because I was still breastfeeding, I was still expressing. And they were like, just do what you want, this is your time now, you can't do anything wrong, you know, just give her what comfort she needs. So we did that, and then literally the night came and the morning came, and it was turned into 3 days, and we were like, well, what do we do? You know, I can't sit here waiting in a private room, you know, in our own room in intensive care. So they offered us the, you know, hospice, to stay where we were or to go home. I was like, do you know what? Let's just go home. We'll deal with what we have to deal with when we have to deal with it. But let's just get home. Let's just do what we can do as a family. And
because you hadn't had her home at that point
either. We'd had her home for 3 weeks. Yeah, only for 3 weeks. Yeah. So it was a short, and those 3 weeks were quite stressful because she wasn't putting weight on. You know, there's people in and out, doctors, with health visitors, and it was just trying to work out why she was not. Every time they came, she'd lost a bit more, and I'd had 3 children in 3 years. I'd breastfed them all. I knew she was feeding, and I knew that it wasn't that I was producing milk, but she just wasn't gaining weight, and no one could really understand why. So this explained it all. And yeah, so we literally took her home, and a day turned into a week, and a week into a month, and a month into 6. So we had 6 months with Lily at home where we had no invasive hospital. We knew we couldn't make her better. We just withdrew everything really, other than really supportive treatments that were going to just help her be comfortable. And I think it was, I remember the day she developed a cough. She stopped smiling. That was a big day when I noticed that she hadn't smiled for a while. And that was probably about 10 days before she died. And then on a Sunday night, I think it was, she started coughing. And I said to Dave, I don't like this. There's something not right. And, you know, your immediate reaction is to try, you know, she hadn't fed, and trying to feed her. And I phoned my mum and dad and said, can you come and look after the girls? They were in bed. I'm not happy. I think I need to get Lily into hospital. So we took her down and they did an X-ray. And yeah, her heart, the mitochondrial disease are called cardiomyopathy, and her heart had basically dilated so much, like it was just like a dead flower, really. It had sort of opened and wasn't working. So the cough actually was her fluid. You know, her heart wasn't pumping anything round.
Moving around her body.
I was trying to feed her, and actually all I was doing, she was just drowning in the fluids that I was trying to feed because I didn't know any different. You learn a lot when you're in this situation, but so it wouldn't have made any difference. The heart had, it was broken. So the doctor said, I think she's got 24 hours. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go again. Ring round the family, tell them where we are, what we're doing. And I was really conscious of my two elders girls. There were 2 and almost 4 at the time. And I remember thinking, I don't want them to go to bed on that night and Lily was there and wake up in the morning and I'm not there, I'm in hospital and Lily's not here anymore and Lily's died. So I said to Mum and Dad, I know everyone's going to disagree with me, but I want you to get them out of bed. I want you to bring them down here. I want them to be part of this and I want them to be there when Lily dies so that they're part of the journey.
I think that's a really intuitive response from you, Liz, because sometimes we can have such a desire to protect children, or we worry about talking to them about death or illness. But actually, I sometimes say to people, children and natural scientists and natural philosophers, they want to know about
Absolutely
stuff. And they become sometimes more anxious when they're not told things or they're not part of things. But it sounds like you had a really strong intuitive sense that's what you wanted to do with your girls.
I think even going back a little bit, when we first found out that she was dying and we took her home, one of the things that Dave asked, he asked on the ward, I think a counsellor might have come around to see us, and he said, what do we tell the children? And she said, be honest as you can, use words that they understand, don't be frightened of using the words dying, died, death. And even if they don't know what they are now, they'll grow up learning and they'll never ask you, because they'll understand through experience rather than having to be told. And I think that's the best bit of advice that we ever got given, because as soon as we got back, I was able to say to them, my Rosie was 18 months at the time and Katie was 3, an intuitive 3-year-old. And I just remember saying that Lily's got a disease, the doctors can't make her better, she is going to die. And it's the hardest things to say. I probably only said it once. And, and then they make up their own their own decisions on what that means. And I remember watching with Katie, the elder one, the cartoon Button Moon. I don't know if you remember Button Moon, but it was a little man made out of a baked bean tin and a wooden spoon. And he used to take and he was sort of shaped as a rocket, and he used to go up to the moon. And Katie said to me, when Lily dies, Mummy, will she live on the moon like this man? And I thought, what do I say to this? Do I say no, she's going to go to heaven? I thought, well, actually, we don't have a strong belief in heaven or
all those philosophical questions. Like, what do I think? What do I say? What do I,
Exactly. And I thought, what, the moon's actually quite a nice analogy because it's always there. You can always see it. It goes wherever you go, and you can look at it. And so Lily went to the moon, and that was always what it was going to be. And skipping forward again, and birthdays and stuff, we looked at the moon, we sent messages to the moon, and even now they're older, 22 and 20, they talk about Lily on the moon.
I think there's something about death and dying too that puts us in touch with, doesn't it, that things beyond ourselves, whatever you believe around that. And I was talking to someone earlier and they were saying they'd named a star after the person they'd lost, because I think there's something about these are things that are beyond us often.
Absolutely.
We don't expect to go through these experiences. There's something about the wider universe that helps us, remind us, birth, death, they've been going for centuries. We're part of a bigger picture. But so it sounds like you feel quite sensing as I'm talking to you. You feel like you handled the fact of Lily's health, her disease and her dying with the girls quite well. You can stand by how you went through that with them?
I feel really confident in that we did it okay. They're both strong, independent girls. They are well balanced. I get so many people say to me how amazing they are. They are kind. They are giving. They're emotionally intelligent. They've grown up with one living lost a sister. That they were very young, and I'm aware of that. But equally, we'll may come to this. But we set up a charity in Lily's memory, which has been very successful, which I'm sure we'll come back to. And they've grown up with that. So they've not just grown up with Lily; they've grown up with other children that they've known and got to know and lost, and they take all of that on board in their stride. They support me through it and always have as well. And and if there's ever a loss in the community, they ask me how I am. And they're I think
They're very pragmatic about death in a way, aren't they? In a way that we aren't so much as adults. You were telling me earlier about, I think it was the morning Lily died.
It was the morning after Lily died, so we'd come back. So that night. So I didn't, ask the kids to come up, and my whole family were there actually, and it was quite a rememberable night. I'll never forget it. We were all sat around. The staff were amazing, bringing in tea and toast, and they set up a room next door for the children, and my nieces came, and so we all sort of were there as a big family. And the kids fell asleep next door because Lily didn't die when we wanted her's the wrong word, when we were expecting her to die, and she did it her own way. Did it her own way, absolutely. And there was a point, and I kid you not, and you can ask anybody who was in the room with me that night, I was holding her in my arms, and she was staring at me, just looking at me in my eye-to-eye contact. I was like, oh God, she's trying to tell me something. I wonder if this is it. And I kid you not, Kim, she turned her head to the person next to me, did exactly the same to them, and she went around every single person in that group. A real eye-to-eye connection. It was the weirdest thing. It was like, she has been on this planet before, and she's not meant to be here for much longer, and she's come for a reason. And it was weird. I can't even put it into words. So that was an incredible evening with her, and then she died the following day. So we, by the time she died, and we spent a bit of time with her in the hospital, it wasn't a hospice, so it wasn't like we could use a cold room or have longer with her. We only had a few hours. And they said after about 4 hours, it's really time. We need to get Lily, we need to take her from you. And, that was awful, without a shadow of a doubt, leaving car seat in my hand, empty. It was
put her down for the last time from that hug.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. I'm not going to pretend I was really strong and it was amazing. It was really tough. And then you go home and went to bed, and as you alluded to, I woke up in the morning and I went and sat on the bottom stairs in my pajamas, and I remember putting my head in my hands thinking, how do I do this? What do I do? How do I navigate this? Where do I go? And then I heard in the kitchen, Mummy, can we do painting today, Mummy? And I was like, oh, there you go. That's how I do it, and I'm really mindful, and I think I've said to you before, really mindful of the fact that I had 2 children that I had to carry on for, that I wanted to carry on for. And my heart breaks for those people who lose a first child, because I don't know how different my journey would have been if I hadn't have had them. So I feel what happened was tough. It was hard. It's heartbreaking. But I do feel fortunate that I was lucky enough to have 2 other healthy children to get me up in the mornings and give me focus. And
a very grounding, breakfast need to be made and school bags packed, and
you have to go to the school playground. You have to face people, can't hide away. You know, and anybody who's been in my position, I'm sure will know exactly what I mean when you feel like you're in a goldfish bowl. You know, everybody knows who you are, and you're walking into that playground, and it's like everyone's looking. No one really knows what to say. Everybody means it in the nicest possible way, and I think I've been quite fortunate that I don't get cross with people. I know a lot of people get frustrated with the things that people say. I don't think I ever have done. I don't think people mean anything maliciously, and they might say things that are insensitive, and I don't think it's till you've actually been in that situation that you realise how insensitive it maybe is.
No, and but when you're in such a sort of raw state, I think everything, you know, it's a bit like you've lost a layer of skin almost, isn't it? You're so exposed to the world in a way, and I think even just sort of the wrong look or the wrong turn of phrase can leave you feeling so isolated, actually, because I think that's part of it. As you say, if you haven't been through something like this, you do feel very alone as part of it. And was that part of your experience going forward, or was that not so much?
I'm a bit of a talker. I'm from quite a small village that I've been in most of my life, all of my life. So I feel that I've got a lot of support from a lot of people throughout Lily's journey. I felt isolated by the fact that nobody had ever heard of what mitochondrial disease was. And I think I felt isolated to the fact that when she was alive, I was living with a child who was dying. And, you know, I remember being in Sainsbury's once, and when I say I didn't really get cross with people, this person made me a little bit cross. And I remember her being in the papoose, and someone going, "Oh, look, isn't she tiny? She's not very well." And I was like, "Oh, no, she's not really. Oh, she'll be all right, won't she?" I was like, "No, actually, she won't. She's dying." And I felt really mean because I wouldn't normally respond like that, but at that moment in time, I felt like saying,
Because that's the knowledge you were having to carry all the time.
Yeah.
And which is, you know, it's a real burden of knowledge, isn't it? To know that your daughter is going to die. It's sort of a bit like, okay, this is a lot to carry.
Yeah. Any time as well. I used to wake up in the morning and go, "Is today the day? She looks a bit pale. Yeah. She doesn't do this. She doesn't do that."
So for someone to come along and ignore your reality, it sounds like you're like, "No, you can have a bit of this too."
That poor person. I feel guilty even now, all these years on. But yes, I do get it. But I just think, as individuals, we different things upset us. So we get upset if people don't talk to us and ignore us, or don't know what to say, and then we can get upset by what they do say. And I think I think it's really
moment to moment too. You can want to be up one moment, not the next.
My Sainsbury's moment tells you all. Because I never did it again or before that. So it is moment by moment and day by day. And I think I remember another time walking back from school one day, and I was humming something to myself, probably really badly. I hope no one could hear me. And it was, people talk about stages of grief or not stages of grief. I'm not sure. For me, it was very much moments of grief.
Like waves sort of thing?
Pardon?
Like waves or...
Waves. I thought for me, it was more like a whirlpool, 1 minute I was at the top and I was humming a little tune on the way back from school. And then literally, it was like someone had come and hit me on the head with a sledgehammer, and I'd be like, whoosh, right down to that bottom, like sucked into the bottom of that whirlpool. And then the tears would come, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, it's really happened to me. This has happened to me." And then it would be like a slow sort of little whirl back up to the top again, where I'd have more moments. And I suppose over time, that sort of whirlpool drags you down a little bit less often. You spend much more time floating at the top, and then it drags you every now and again. Whereas at the beginning, it's much more up and down within minutes, and you could be all right 1 minute and crying the next, or I'd be talking to somebody and I'd cry and they go, "Oh God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry." And I'm like, "Nope, you haven't made me cry. My daughter died last week. That's what's making me cry, and I'm talking to you about it. It's not something to be frightened of. Don't run away from me because I'm crying, because I just feel a bit crap at the moment. I'm just feeling a bit sad.
And I think that's really helpful for people to hear, because I think it's the unpredictability of when the grief whirlpool or wave is going to hit that can feel so disconcerting, not just in the early days, but it can happen for a while, but as you say, less frequently as time goes on. But it's that you never quite know when that, like, oh, I'm going to go, it's going to happen. And you never know when that grief's going to hit. It can be the oddest thing or nothing.
Sometimes nothing. Sometimes the fact that I was humming to myself and I was like, what am I doing that? It was like that. Why am I doing that? And it literally, I remember it as if it, that particular moment, it was literally like I'd been smacked on the head. But over time, it changes. It doesn't ever go away, but it does change.
When we spoke earlier, you very much wanted to talk about one particular aspect of the loss of Lily, which was particularly challenging for you, or was very much part of your grief. And I wondered if you wanted to say a bit more about that now.
Yeah, we're talking about the words and the emotion guilt.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think because I knew and I had the knowledge that Lily was dying, the guilt word or the guilt emotion played a lot on my mind. And I was in a good relationship. I had 2 healthy children. I've got sisters who have got children, and my nieces and nephews who I think the world of, and I always have done. And I think I spoke a lot to myself about how I was going to manage, because I've heard people talk about feeling guilty about having a nice time or going on a holiday and I suppose I sort of was able to sort of spend a bit of time with myself thinking about this. And I also had the ability to talk to Lily about it. And I remember just a quick conversation with her. Obviously, she didn't talk. But I remember saying to her, when you die, I'm not going to feel guilty about living and giving the girls the best life they can possibly have, because they deserve it. And in my mind, I would have done anything at all to have Lily live in whatever form she was going to be and whatever that disease was going to give her. However, we didn't have that choice. And, and I've said it 1,000 times. If somebody had said to me, go and live in a public toilet for 10 years or whatever and don't come out and Lily would be fine, I would have done it. But I couldn't. So I felt like there's no point dragging myself down to that level when I've got no chance or choices to make anything different. So I think I made a very conscious decision to enable us as a family and enable me as a person to enjoy my children, to love my nieces and nephews, even those who were born very closely to Lily, and will always have a, my niece was just a few months younger and very much involved in Lily's life. And she doesn't remember because she was only a baby. But, that could have been really hard for me, and I could have had a level of resentment, and I was determined that wasn't going to ever be the case. All my sisters, my brother, have all got 3 children. I had 3, I've now got 2, and that plays on my mind, but I really try hard. Well, I've really tried hard over the years to make sure that I'm not resentful of that. And the other thing really important to me is that I really wanted Lily to be a positive in our family. I didn't want any of us to think of her, and when we thought of her, we cried or we were sad. I wanted the smiles and the memories to be the positive thing, because I kept thinking that if we can't do that, then what was the point of Lily ever being here? And I would have hated to have lived a life without her. So it's very, very conscious, I think, decision of ours, of mine at Dave's maybe, to not allow her to bring us and drag us down, but to use her and her strength and her determination to be a positive on all of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful thing you've done, Liz, really, in all sorts of ways. And listening to you talk, what I'm hearing is how much, as a therapist, what I'm hearing is how much psychological work you've done on so many different levels, as an individual, as a mum, and as a family. That's really impressive. And I hope, really is sort of I don't like the word inspiration, because it always feels a bit like, but it gives other people hope that they can get through this, that actually it is possible, that when you have a child with a shortened life, whether that's expected or unexpected, that actually that child's life is still meaningful and can be impactful in a positive way on you as a mum and as a family. And your girls too will make sense of having had a sister who died when they were little and as a baby, as they grow up in different ways, because of course we're always processing loss in different ways at different times, not with the same intensity, as you say, but we live with it, we process it differently at different times. One of the ways you made sense of your loss too was you formed the Lily Foundation. You want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, completely unintentional.
I hear this a lot with rare disease organisations. Didn't mean to do this, but it still happened.
Yeah. I didn't mean to do it. I think mitochondrial disease is a rare disease. Not many people have heard of it, and there were no active charities around. There was one, and I looked at the website, and it hadn't been updated for about 3 years. I was like, not put any money into that. And I think, during Lily's 6 months at home, we realised that there was a very little support for families like us. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, and everything we found on the internet seemed to be written for doctors, by doctors, and really nothing for patients to try and get their head around what on earth was going on. And then we'd asked for donations instead of flowers at her funeral, and there was nowhere to send these donations. And I really felt quite passionate that we wanted the donations to do something towards mitochondrial disease. And then, as happens when you lose a child, your friends, your family, everybody sort of rallies around. There's not much they can do other than put themselves in uncomfortable situations and raise money, and do silly challenges and long challenges, and that's what happened. And there was nowhere for them. There was not a charity to do it for.
Yeah.
So we did it. We set up a charity, and I was very much supported by my brother-in-law, who is a football commentator, and he worked for the BBC. And he was like, "We can do this. We can really make this something." And he got a lot of support from his colleagues at the time, and he ran the London Marathon. A year after Lily died, him and my husband Dave, partner Dave, and he was writing in the Daily Mirror for sports. He was on Football Focus. They gave him a slot on that. They interviewed Dave and Jonathan on the what's it called, London Bridge at 13 miles. He was quite a big guy, do you know what I mean? So he massively put himself out of his comfort zone. And we'd had the charity, we had a logo, and it really spearheaded. People started to get in touch, because I didn't know anybody. Didn't know anyone who had mitochondrial disease. So I just remember thinking, how on earth are we going to set up a charity? We don't know anyone. The only person we know is Lily, and she's died. Who's going to support it? Where's it going to go? And there we are. We're 18 years later. We've raised over £11 million, and we fund and we support families throughout the UK.
And it's an extraordinary legacy from this little girl who was, what an impact she has had on the world, having been in it for just, 6 months.
8 months
Eight
altogether.
months.
Yeah.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it? How powerful her impact has been. And
yeah, I think, do you know what I've always said? That the Lily Foundation was in Lily's memory, but not for Lily. It was always, in my mind, always very much about supporting those living with the disease, supporting those who go through what we've been through, going through the diagnosis process, making sure you have someone to talk to, someone at the end of the phone, someone that I can, I used to try really hard in the early days to connect people that I felt would be a good support to each other. And obviously to try and raise some money as well for research, because there wasn't that much going on. I forgot what I was going to say. I've lost my thread.
I mean, what was coming to mind, it might come back to you when you were talking, was that memory you shared of Lily in her last, moments, looking around the room and making eye contact with every single person, and thinking about how, Lily seemed to be all about connection, even at that earliest age. And this is what you've taken forward for her, is that connecting people, and how powerful that is.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. So, yes, I've never really thought about it like that, actually, Kim. But you're right. We're very much about that connection and bringing people together from in all different stages, whether it's through grief, through loss, should I say, or living with the mitochondrial disease. And I think that's been one of our most successful areas of the charity. But also, I think from the early days, it was Lily's determination and strength. And I thought, if she can do that, well, she was supposed to die after 5 days in intensive care, and she didn't. And she gave us that opportunity to learn more about mitochondrial disease, to have her with us for longer, to be sort of driven by that strength and determination. That I think that's what drove me really back in those early days. And now I'm driven by the fact that I can't give up. There's too much to do. But yeah, she was, for something so little and so small, she did have a special little power. And you're right, that connectivity, that determination, that hope that she brought. Because I remember I used to think, she's still alive today. Maybe one day, you never know. If we can get to a month into 2 months, who knows what the future might hold? Maybe she'll surprise everyone, and she might find a cure. Obviously, it's wishful thinking, but I think as a parent, you need that. It's what keeps you going every day.
Yeah.
So
hope has to be in the mix, doesn't it, somewhere? Even if you think, I think this is not the case, it is part of just maybe somehow keeps you going sometimes.
Absolutely. And that belief that there will one day be something that can be done. But yeah, she was an inspiration. But yeah, as I say, it was never for her. I was really conscious of the fact that I didn't want it just to be all about Lily and my loss of Lily, and it was very much, hopefully, much more forward thinking in terms of really supporting those who were living in the here and now.
One of the things that I think often happens with rare disease organisations, they're formed because those who found them want something to be there that wasn't there for them. You've talked about this a bit, and I suppose that leads me into my last question. Really, is what would you want to say, perhaps, to parents who might be listening, knowing this might be a part of their story with their child at some point, or who have already gone through this? What would have helped you to hear in those early days and when Lily was very poorly?
I think that you will be okay. It's not going to be easy. It's incredibly sad. The pain. I think one of the things that struck me after Lily died was the physical pain. I didn't realise that grief actually really hurt deep inside, I didn't understand that, and I don't think you ever will until you go through it. But it physically hurts, and I've Lily was my first loss, of any family member. So everyone was different, when it's your child. But I that's something that really shocked me, and I think that pain, it never really goes away, but you learn to live with it, and in the early days it visits you, all the tears, the hurt, it comes to you all the time. You've got no control over that. A bit like we were talking about with the whirlpool, you've got no control over when it comes. And I think over time you decide when to visit it. So that's how it works for me now. So birthdays, Christmases, anniversaries, certain days, Mother's Day, maybe, that they're the days that I choose. Don't get me wrong, she's on my mind all day, every day, partly because of what I do, but also just because she's part of my life, and as are my other two. I speak with them both at university, speak with them most days. So that never ever goes away. But the pain and the sadness, I think, I visit rather than it visiting me in my time, which means that it's and we talked a bit about enjoying holidays and family time and not being frightened to do that, because for me it's an important, as much as it is for the rest of our family, but also for Lily, that she didn't take away our lives, she's just enhanced them.
Yeah, that your life in all its fullness goes on, and you carry the pain with you. It's different intensity at different times, but it also changes over time too.
It does change over time. It never goes away. I could, if I wanted to, I could be in tears now talking to you, but I don't want to be, because it's not helpful to anybody necessarily. So, you can pick and choose, I feel, a little bit more. And, and as I say, it's there's some big days, there's a big memories. Doesn't always have to be an anniversary or birthday. There might be another day that you remember that you did something. And obviously the first year of everything is always really hard. This time, that's what I found really hard, thinking this time last year, I just found out I was pregnant. Or this time last year, and those memories of that first scan and everything was fine. Or do you remember when my life was okay? Before this date, everything was hunky-dory, and then everything changed today, a year ago, and I want to go back to because you become a different person, and I think that's probably quite hard to come to terms with as well, because you want to be that person that you were before you were hurting so much, before that your heart was broken and your life was pulled apart and turned upside down, and when you were really happy about finding out you're pregnant, or having that 3-month scan, or whatever it is that you remember, and you have to acknowledge and sort of somehow accept the fact that you're never going to get that back.
And that's grieving the person you were too, isn't it, in a way? Grieving that that carefree or more innocent person, in a way, is not who you are now. And it's a different how you find ways to carry this with you, and in positive ways. You're both the same, but you're very different too.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that. I think it's pretty important that we acknowledge that.
Yeah. Liz, I'm enormously grateful for you talking so openly. And I think when we started talking about this podcast, we both very much hoped it would be helpful for people who might be facing similar situations to you, whether that's through mitochondrial disease or very different rare condition too. We're going to put in the links afterwards, some links of some charities that support those who've lost a child or lost a baby in early pregnancy. So do feel you can look those up too. But Liz, thank you so much for talking to me. I found it really moving, and really, I'm really grateful for you talking with us today.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Liz.